paper, scissors, shoot. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Ooh,
Gosh.
Look at that. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. Hey, everybody. Good evening. This is, what is this, episode?
6.
Episode 6 of
The
Online
intro.
with OnPoint.
And you don't even know what episode we're on.
Online with OnPoint. Woo!
Good evening, OnPoint family. Welcome back to our Online with OnPoint. We're excited that you're with us. Hopefully you tuned in last week for our Easter worship service and that you tuned in onto this new online platform that we've been using where you can communicate down below and interact with us throughout this entire video with questions or comments of things that you are thinking about as we talk about different topics. This week we're going to be focusing on a new series called On the Verge.
Yeah, and we are extremely excited for this, mainly because On the Verge is that understanding that, sometimes life takes us to the moments where we're on the verge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's so easy at times to feel like we want to give up, like we want to give out, and just collapse. There's times where it's so easy to want to give in, right, to the temptations, the distractions. And in those moments, right, I think it's important for us to understand how we can face God, like how we can move our direction towards God. So instead of giving up, we can stand strong and move forward. Instead of giving in to the temptation or the distractions of the world, we have the ability to kind of withstand that and prepare our hearts to handle those situations well. Which leads us to where we're kicking this thing off and starting at, and that is the reality that everyone comes to the edge. Everyone has these moments where we are on the verge, kind of at the end of our rope, if you will, and all those cliche interactions and phrases that kind of lead us to this visual or this understanding that, man, sometimes life gets to where it feels like we're out of control and feels like we can't move on. But those are the moments that we want to push forward and focus our eyes on God. And we're at today, right? We've actually challenged you already to have read through Joshua 3, because that will actually help us in our discussion today, because we wanted this to be a little shorter for an opportunity to give you some times before our small groups tonight to reflect and to take time to go through some reflection questions and again, kind of think through how God is moving in this story in Joshua. But it's so fascinating. And so let's just jump in. And then I'd love kind of your input and things as we walk along. And obviously, we're not going to read through the entire chapter, but I do want to grab a picture of what is actually going on here and happening. And so this follows right after the story of Moses, right? So Joshua actually enters the scene after Moses and Aaron lead the Israelites out of Egypt. And right, part of that reality with Moses was that God had promised Moses that he was going to lead the Israelites to the promised land. Now, after he leads them across the Red Sea, they enter into this wandering period and this wilderness. And it's within that, right, that there's some things that Moses does that kind of put him on a trajectory of God telling him, you know what, you're not actually going to get to inherit the promised land. It's going to pass down, and Joshua is actually going to be the one to lead them in the promised land. And so Joshua, the beginning of Joshua, right, and we're in Joshua 3 today, so we're only 3 chapters in, happens right after Moses has passed away. So Moses dies, and then all of a sudden God's plan and promises can begin to come to fruition. But again, they don't know where the promised land is. They don't know where God is leading them. God is right, the one in control, the one in the leading. And at this point, they've already instilled the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant was this. If you've seen Indiana Jones, right? If you've seen Indiana Jones, there is the Indiana Jones where they're looking for the Ark of the Covenant. That's one of the movies. Did you know that?
Yes, I did.
Okay. I don't know how up to date
I've
you
never
were on
watched
the.
it, but I do know.
You should watch them.
Okay.
We can watch them along the other list of movies that I want you to watch. within the Ark of the Covenant, it was known to hold the presence of God, right? Meaning that there were only certain people that could actually hold the Ark of the Covenant. You had to be a certain distance. When it was in the temple, it had to be, again, in that innermost part of the temple, and what they called the holy of holies, or and so like the Ark of the Covenant was so idolized for good reason, because it was known to hold the presence of God. And so many of the miracles for the Israelites were happening as the Ark of the Covenant was actually leading them. So these priests would actually be carrying this Ark of the Covenant. We're going to read about that in a second, but so that kind of leads us to where we're at. So they have the Ark of the Covenant. Moses has passed away. Joshua is now kind of the leader, moving them into the promised land. But it definitely comes with some uncertainty, which is what we're going to read a little bit in chapter 3. So if you thought that the parting of the Red Sea was the only moment where God stopped water, you're wrong. And we're going to read a little bit about that today, because God, again, does some amazing things. But again, hopefully you've already read Joshua 3. But there's a few things that I think are just so valuable as we kind of dig into this story. And it says, right in verse 2, after 3 days, the officers went throughout the camp, giving orders to the people. When you see the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God and the Levitical priests carrying it, you are to move out from your positions and follow it. What can we kind of pull from that?
The presence of God is what's leading the people where God's bringing them,
Right. So right off the bat, the commission and the call is to follow the Ark of the Covenant, which means literally how we understand that is it's the call of following the presence of God, which is so massive for how we understand our faith and how we understand the movement and God's direction in our life. It says, then you will know which way to go, right? On the verge, on the edge, it feels like we don't know which way to go. If you want to know which way to go, what do we got to do?
You got to follow God.
We got to follow God. Since you have never been this way before. Again, just such strong language in this is we are tracking into a territory we've never been before. And that's a lot of what faith is. It's so we just don't know. There's so much uncertainty, but it's about how we're, again, planting our feet and moving forward. Down in verse 5, I love this, right? Joshua told the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. What does consecrate mean?
To cleanse yourself and prepare, right?
Yeah, so it literally means to set ourselves apart, which is where we get that holy language. Consecrated and holy is kind of those two words that go one and two together. So consecration is the action of making ourselves holy, which I think, again, is such a strong picture for the challenge and the call to follow the direction of God, to follow the promises of God, to follow the presence of God. Man, that's not always easy, but we have to be, again, prepared for that. We have to be readying ourselves for that, which is a little bit of what we've talked about since January, right? So what is that kind of that language that we've been using this year since January?
We've talked about what it means to be kingdom dwellers, and then the challenge of are we reflecting Jesus within that kingdom dwelling? Are we being more like him? And I said in the challenge of what God's called us to be as Christians. And so when we read this and it talks about consecrating yourselves for tomorrow, and the Lord will do amazing things, it's that challenge. I feel like you said, to go back to how are we being kingdom dwellers? Are we going out into the world and being like Jesus, so that when people see us, that they see the presence of God, or that they see Jesus through our actions and through the way our words and through the way that we act.
Yeah. And the reality of why we challenged the kingdom dwelling was for the kingdom expansion, right? So in making kingdom impact is kind of twofold. Is we soak in the presence of God, right? We dwell within that, which gives us the power to then go and make disciples, to then go and move forward and develop our faith and expand the kingdom, right? Share the good news and share the love of Christ. And so here we go, and we continue to develop into the story in verse 7, right? And the Lord said to Joshua, today I will begin to exalt you in the eyes of Israel, so that you may know I am with you as I was with Moses. Tell the priest who carry the Ark of the Covenant when you reach the edge of the Jordan's water to go and stand in the river. Right? So again, we're on this language of on the verge, being called on the edge. And so many times in life, when we get on the edge is when God kind of does these miraculous things, because when we're on the edge, we can't always, I want you to kind of vision you being on this massive cliff that's just thousands and thousands of feet up in the air. So if you were to look down over the edge, you can't see the bottom.
Mm.
And if you were to look up on the horizon, there's no other side, right? And so when we're on the edge, this is kind of the image I want you to get you, because this is a lot of times how we encounter God, is we are standing on the edge. We can't see the bottom, right? If we were to fall, and we can't see the direction that we're to being led. And, I kind of envision this. I know this is super cheesy, but Onward just came out. And do you remember the scene there of where, of course, he wants the rope tied, he wants the safety net, and he wants but he's challenged of like, there's the invisible bridge. And so he like uses the staff to like create walk this to walk on this invisible bridge. That's how I kind of am envisioning this. All right. So stay with my cheesy brain for a second, but it's that reality of like, man, sometimes we are taking a step that we can't see. Sometimes we're taking that step that we can't see. And that's a little bit about what God was doing here of like, hey, Joshua, commission your people to not only go to the water's edge, but I want you to tell them to go out in the Jordan. And the crazy thing about this is later it actually talks about that this is during flood season, because during harvest season, the river is always kind of at that flooding level, meaning that it's super high. And if you've ever seen a river that's flooded, right, like the Ohio River we have here, when it's flooded, man, that water is moving, is really fast, right? Like it is moving. And so this wouldn't have been an easy task for them. Like it would have been really easy for them to think in their brain, well, if I go out far enough, there's nothing I can do to stop. Like it's just, but that's the call of God, right? Like, not only do I want you to stand on the edge, but I want you to take that leap of faith. I want you to take that step into the water with the uncertainty, the unknowing of what's going to happen. And that's exactly where we are today. And that's all I'm going to read in the story, because I want you to continue reading. And what I hope is that you've already read this. And so you'll kind of know where the story ends. But what I wanted to do as we, again, move towards this opportunity for us to take some time to reflect, is I want to look at two what I feel are common misconceptions about faith and about God, right? Because we've through the story, and as you read this, you'll kind of develop and kind of understand that there's moments that are there's just pieces of gold in this. This stuff is like really good of like, man, consecrate yourselves, preparing yourselves, following the lead of the Ark of the Covenant, those types of things that we can continue to unwrap. But we'll have opportunity to do that within small groups and stuff. What I want to take time in this reality of understanding that everyone comes to the edge. Everyone has these on the verge moments. I've had them. You've had them, where it feels like, man, we're at the end of the rope. Sometimes it just feels like we're hanging on to the end of the rope and the rope's already been cut off, right? Like it feels like we're just falling. But that's when we oftentimes see God do these miraculous things. And so what I want to do kind of is look at two misconceptions, and I would love to get your reaction on them. Okay. The first misconception is this: when we become Christ followers, things will get easier. First reaction.
That is not true. No, I think that is probably like a really big misconception when it comes to faith. And it's very easy to get discouraged within your faith when you realize that nothing's changed outside of like the things around you. And so and I think that's what a lot of people think. They think that when I become a Christ follower, everything in my life that I don't have control over is going to change because I'm a Christ follower. Whereas the reality of it is the thing that's changed is you. And moving forward,
that's so good.
Moving that's forward is
mic drop.
Moving forward, that it's about how you interact with the things around you that are going to make that change that Jesus calls us to do.
Yeah.
So,
which I think is huge, because there's so many, again, we're talking about on the verge here, and these moments of where it feels so easy to want to give up and give in. And I feel like even more when we make a decision to follow Jesus in the midst of that, I think a lot of times we make these decisions thinking that it will free us from those things. And that's not true. But the reality is, like you said, it gives us a platform and a different foundation to stand on in those moments, right? It strengthens our step for us to be able to kind of handle it, conquer it at times, of where, again, that opportunity for us to be identified with Christ Jesus is to know that we have hope, that we have freedom, that we have purpose and intention, and we have a promise. Just like Joshua and the Israelites have already been given a promise from God of entering into the promised land. Man, that's the promise we've been given. We have a promised land that we, as followers of Jesus, will get to encounter one day. But man, there's a process in getting there. There's one step at a time. There's this development of faith, this intimate relationship that goes into this, and that is not an easy journey. I mean, and you know that living here on earth, and even what we're experiencing right now, man, this is a trial. Like this virus and things. It is not easy waters to walk through. And people are losing jobs. And people are dying. I mean, it's just a scary thing. But I certainly believe that there are ways that God can continue to utilize it. And I don't want to take that the wrong way, but God is in the redemptive business. Like, he redeems things, and he calls us out to becoming closer, more intimate with him, which leads me to my second misconception. And that is, God will, again, we're told this oftentimes, and it's used as one of those things that seems to be a point of peace or comfort, which I think is actually not true at all. But it's this misconception that God will never give you more than you can handle. What do you think about that?
I think that, again, obviously that's not true. I think he calls us into these really hard situations with the intentions of us knowing that we're not in it alone. And I think for someone like me who loves control and loves having a plan and thinks I know how everything's going to end because of the ways that I put things together or the way that I prepared for stuff, is where we fail automatically, because it's what I want. It's not, we're so focused on our wants and our needs that we forget that we're not in control, that we don't have, we don't know what's going to happen in the next moment. Yet we try so hard to plan that out. And so when we are placed in a situation like that, and we realize that we fail, we are placed on, we're on the verge of brokenness and on the edge of something that we can't control, because we've put in so much dependence on depending on ourselves rather than knowing, that we're not meant to do it ourselves. We're not meant to handle everything that we're going through without God. So I think it's important to remember that. Yeah.
And this is where, again, we're wrapping up here. So I think that's so huge, right? And this understanding that, man, I think that misconception is unbiblical. Because I think when I read my Bible, what I see in the Bible is God intentionally putting people in situations that they just what was my misconception? My brain totally dropped out here. Is that God will never put us in
give us anything.
Give us anything we can handle. My goodness. So I think, again, it's unbiblical, because I think oftentimes as we read through the Bible, God is intentionally putting people, and even people groups, right? These Israelites even, in situations that they can't handle. For twofold, I think one is that it puts us in a situation where we have to rely and be dependent on God, right? You think about that imagery of, I used to talk to Richie about this. Again, with a pastor we've talked about that was so influential in our lives, but passed away fighting cancer. And he used to talk about this a lot of, like, he felt like God not only put people at the edge of the rope, he said it felt like a lot of times that God actually put people in a situation where there was no rope. Because it forces you, like with the rope, you kind of still have that safety net of like, all right, if I can muster enough strength on my own, I can climb up this thing. But no. God's like what Richie was saying is like, no, if there is no rope. Because what it forces us to do is to then cry out and reach out to God, right? We have to put our dependency and our full trust and reliance on God the Father, right? And so with that misconception of God will never give us more than we can handle, well, if that was true, there would be no need for God, because that we could handle it. Like we could solve the problems on our own. We could take care of it on our own. There would be no need. Which is just not how God has created us to be. God has created us for relationship with Him, for that hunger with Him. And that's why when we try to fulfill our lives with things that aren't of Him, it feels empty and it's not satisfying and it's not fulfilling. Which again, within this, right, like these moments breed us an opportunity to put our trust and reliance and dependency on God. So yeah, those are my two misconceptions. So I would love for you guys to give those things some thought, right, as you're reading through Joshua 3. And also over the next few minutes before we start our small groups, we've also attached in our resource link and also on the emails that went out this morning some reflection questions. And what we'd love for you to do over these next few minutes is actually take time to reflect in that spirit of, man, like some of us may be on the edge right now. Some of us may be in the verge. In this series, when we're talking about on the verge, some of us may actually be standing in the Jordan before God has stopped the waters. Like in that uncertainty of like, I don't know. But so my challenge to you guys through this time of reflection is asking yourselves, pondering those things. How can I put my trust and reliance on God? How can I continue to move and move my direction and focus and following the presence of God, even in these moments on the verge? And so these reflection questions are going to be opportunities for you to reflect on that, to think about, am I on the verge right now, or have I been? How does that make me feel? How does it give me, how have I reacted and responded in those situations, right? How did I feel prepared in that? How would I prepare myself differently for those things now? And then also, this is a big thing because God was using this moment to teach the Israelites something, to teach Joshua something. And you'll actually unpack a little bit of that in Joshua 3 if you've read it. But so much of that, again, is I feel like God uses these moments to teach us and to pull us closer and to understand more about who God is. And so that's that last question that I really want you to think about is, what do you feel like God was trying to teach you and tell you and communicate to you in these moments of being on the verge? So we hope you enjoy the time of reflection and utilize that well over these next few moments. But can you close us in some prayer?
Dear Lord, thank you just for bringing us here to just learn more about you, to grow in your word, Lord. As we enter into this new series, allow us to understand that we all are on the verge, that we've all been there, and that we've all come to the edge with uncertainty and confusion and frustration, and because we lack control, Lord. But allow us to know that we're not in control, that we can rely on you, and you will show us the direction and the way that you want us to go, Lord. Just give us the strength to let it go, and to know that you that we can hand it over to you, and we won't have to worry. We won't have to live life on the edge or on the verge, because we're not meant to. We're not meant to stay on the edge and on the verge, because we know that you are in control. Thank you for today. Just allow us to reflect and just grow more into your word and understand how you're trying to use us today and every day, Lord. We're looking for you and your son. We pray in his name. Amen.
Amen. All right. We love you guys. See you in a few minutes at small groups, and really take advantage of this opportunity in these reflection questions. So yeah, be blessed. See you in a few minutes.